Hello and welcome to Life Edge, because life doesn't have to be mediocre. My name is Sarah Muliadi and I'm filling in today for Rick Zanotti, but we have our wonderful co-host, Dr. Susan Nash, with us today. Hello, Susan.
Hello, and happy day after 4th of July.
That's right. So we have a great guest today. I'll let Susan do the honors, but first let's run our intro. And we're back. So Susan, who do we have the pleasure of speaking to today?
We have a great guest, David Allard, and I met him at our annual convention in Salt Lake City, the American Association of Petroleum Geologists, and David was signing books. He's an independent geologist who has had incredibly intriguing experiences and valuable ones all around the world. So I was very interested in his book and thought I would invite him to the show so he could talk a little bit about his experiences. So welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome, David. So, what made you want to write a book, become an author?
Well, early in my career, I moved into the international arena of petroleum exploration, and I realized I may see a variety of things, so I started keeping a journal. And then 20 years later, I had 14 journals, and I just wanted to share the range of experiences, of cultures, and business experiences.
That's great. How did you get started in geology, or how did you get interested in it in the first place?
That's a good question. When I was in middle school, I knew I was going to be in earth science, and my plan was to be a forestry major. And I went to the college orientation day, and the different professors for earth science said, well, that's great if you got a PhD, you might get a job. Why don't you try geology? And I said, okay. I've been a geologist ever since.
Oh, nice. So what was your first job after you graduated?
I worked actually in San Francisco, California for a major oil and gas company. We're exploring onshore and offshore California.
So how did you first get your out-of-country assignment, and where did you go?
Well, after about 9 years of experience, I was with an integrated large major, which was fantastic for the variety of training and job experiences. I worked primarily in West Texas and the Rockies. And I got the call to join the international group out of Houston on the strength of my operations and petrophysical or log analysis skills. And I made the move to Houston, and I worked internationally for that company and the subsequent company over a period of 20 plus years, and I worked in 20 plus countries.
Where was your first assignment?
My very first assignment was about a week or two after I joined the international group. The group secretary said, here's your tickets. I said, where am I going? She said, Turkey. So after a few shots and a couple of days on planes and automobiles, I found myself in eastern Turkey.
Oh, nice. So which exact part of eastern Turkey were you?
I was in what is now Kurdistan. We were drilling onshore, looking for structural traps.
Oh, that's interesting, because I've spent a lot of time in Azerbaijan, which is like, I wasn't in that part though. It's interesting. So did your family go with you? Were you married at the time?
I was freshly married a year into it at the time I started my international work. And after many years of rotational assignments and then business trips for the business units, including Azerbaijan many times also, but I realized rather than being gone from my wife and young son, I switched companies in order to move with my family overseas so we could be together. And we lived in Egypt for 5 years and then Scotland for 3.5 years. So it was a great time.
Oh, great. Well, what were some of your first experiences and life lessons?
Well, I learned a lot about above ground risk right off the bat. So when people ask about international oil and gas business, as a geologist, our job is to talk about below ground risk and portray the size of the opportunity that you might drill for. Above ground risk has to do with security and the negotiation of international contracts with your host country. So early on, I learned that you needed both pieces to work well in order to have a successful venture.
Oh, that's very true. In terms of negotiations, what were some of the things that you found that would be where you could avoid some of the pitfalls?
Well, my early international work was operationally focused, and then middle and latter international, I was moved into management, and I got more involved with the negotiations aspect of it. And the key things that I found, regardless of the country, is first of all, try to understand the best you can the culture of the host country as well as the rules. And then portray, typically foreign companies are involved with international ventures because this country may need investment and or technology. So you want to be able to portray what you're going to do for the country as well as what's in it for them. If you're successful, what kind of future revenue could they bring? And a lot of these international contracts want to know, okay, how many wells are you going to drill? How much seismic? Are you going to employ local labor? Those kinds of things.
Well, I think that one of the things that people do not understand in the general public is how much good international companies do in helping build the infrastructure and educational facilities and in training the nationals, foreign nationals, and developing or capacity building, really. And I think that it would be interesting. We'll talk about some of the positive things that you've seen.
When you talk about that, I think back to, you know, I've been in such a variety of primarily exploration, but some development operations as well. But on the exploration front, when we're out drilling some of the first wells in a basin, if you're successful, it could be a huge influx of capital investment and job creation for locals. So, you know, until we invent better schemes, oil and gas is still the key driving force for energy for our world. So I was in Central Africa in such a remote location that we went into small villages and saw people that the children ran away because they'd never seen white people. And in that operation, we were appraising an old discovery, and it turned out to be billions of barrels. And over the course of 15 years later, they finally developed that, built a pipeline to the west coast from Chad through Cameroon, and it's created over $1 billion, you know, tens of thousands of jobs for locals in what was a very poor third world country. So to be a part of that is just kind of gratifying.
Oh, that's amazing. So how did you usually prepare to go, like, if you're going to another country? You learn the language, and how do you get into getting used to the culture?
Absolutely. We typically read up on the culture and the politics, and when I worked South America, for example, I tried really hard to become a better Spanish speaker. That was my most successful language, but you know, invariably I tried to learn Arabic when I was living and working in Egypt, but the staff that we hire is dominated by very bright Egyptian geologists who in the office speak English, so I never got to practice much more than, you know, yes, no, maybe so.
That's funny. Where did you work in South America?
Guatemala was, that's where that image came from, and that's a fairly lengthy story, but we're drilling exploration wells onshore in northern Guatemala, and at the time there was still, it was on the decline, but there was a civil war or rebel uprising against the government, and so we had rebels visit our location in a remote jungle location, and these guys are regular Guatemalan army who 500 of them came in and the rebels vanished, luckily, without shooting at each other with us in the middle. And so I became friends with these guys. They were protecting our location as we finished up drilling an exploration well, not far from the Mayan ruins, the Great Tikal.
That's amazing. I've actually worked that area before. It was after the Civil War, though.
Good thing.
Yeah.
It's a lovely country. It has a lot of things to see. Ancient Spanish ruins and volcanoes and beautiful jungle and Mayan ruins.
Yeah, Sarah's actually studied the Mayan ruins.
Well, I took some classes, like, we had an interview with a Mayan archaeologist, I think it was 2 weeks ago or something like that, Dr. Andrew Kinkela. And yeah, it's just a very fascinating culture and area. Yeah, I was wondering, so you said you always had your family traveling with you. Like, how did they take the, like moving around, and how did it affect your family dynamics? Did they really enjoy traveling with you?
Yes. So in my book covers a period of 20 plus years in 20 plus countries. And so for 8 of those years, kind of the middle to latter years, my family and I were together, and we had a fantastic time in Egypt. There was a vibrant expat community. We did a lot of traveling outside the rest of the world, plus enjoyed the culture, and the business was very successful. We were making a lot of discoveries, so it was a very exciting time. And then we moved directly for myself, I was moving up in management, so I was selected as one of the 5 representatives of this large independent to move to Aberdeen, Scotland, and open our office there, and we entered the North Sea. And we were very excited to go to such a beautiful country, so vastly different from Egypt. And my son just said, it's the same. Guys wear dresses and there's lots of goats around.
Oh, that's so funny.
I like it. So how old was your son when you lived there?
When we moved to Egypt, he was in kindergarten, and then he went to 5th, 6th, and 7th grade in Scotland at the American International School.
What a great experience for him.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah, so I was wondering, what do you consider is the hardest part of writing a book?
Just finding time to write. And,
yeah, I can see that.
And I kind of an insomniac, so all hours of the night, lots of airplane rides, I would find time to write. And just making a clear message.
Yeah.
Well, having the journals is a good thing. Sometimes people write from their memories, and they tend to be like out of Africa, and it tends to be like Isaac Denison wrote out of Africa. She wrote like many years after she lived there and moved away from the vantage point of being in Denmark. And I think that's a lot different experience than actually working with your journals. Did you feel the need to add anything from memory when you were working with your journals?
Oh, absolutely. The process for me was, with that much content, the first step was I ran into a publisher and we found somebody, we just typed up the content and edited the raw journals, and that was 500 plus pages, and he said, no, too long, cut.
Oh, gosh.
So
that's a lot of
the
material.
book itself is 336 pages, but I not only cut, the journals are filled with a lot of travel details, and I rewrote it and got the help of a professional co-author to try to make it into a flowing first-person narrative. And I think that went pretty well, but as I wrote it, I beefed up technical description, historical perspective, things like that I didn't necessarily capture in the initial journals. But the journals captured the detail. Geologist, I'm a little bit technical, so it was a challenge to boil it down to a flowing, readable book.
Yeah, that's a really good practice to write journals. Like my mom, she writes her journal every day. She's been doing it for I don't know how many years, and I've always wanted to, but I never had the discipline to actually like write it every day or even like every 2 days or whatever. So yeah, so you still are doing that. I assume you still are journaling.
Not so much. It was really an international focus because I knew I'd see so much. In the early days when I was on remote locations, I had a lot of time and saw many things. But in the latter days, I was taking business trips, working out of the office as a manager, and time got away from me. So there was occasions where I'd be weeks behind and trying to catch up with the journal.
Oh, yeah. That's so hard when you have to catch up.
You know what I think would be really interesting is to take all the scraps that you rejected and then just scramble them and then do some sort of stream of consciousness as you're like putting them in order and create a kind of postmodernist Thomas Pynchon or David Foster Wallace type of thing and mix in some philosophy and just make it completely try to not make sense with it and see what happens.
That would be fascinating. I mean, now I got a whole nother idea for a new book.
Oh yeah, that's right. You were saying before the show that you're planning to write another book. You wanted to
I have an idea for another book. There's a lot of people like me that have some very interesting stories and experiences that are worth sharing. And if you look at the oil and gas industry as a whole, of course now most companies are trying to get in on the horizontal drilling and fracking technology, and international exploration has not got the emphasis that it had, say, in the 90s. So my coverage of my book spanning the late 80s through 2010 or so is kind of a bygone era of international exploration. Sure, there's many companies still doing it, but
you're right, it's a lot different, but some of the leadership issues stay the same, right? I mean, like, what would you say were your top 5 or 10? How about 2 or 3 thoughts about leadership?
Yeah, well, what I learned critically, as I alluded to earlier, Susan, is to respect the host culture, to respect the host country, and that was very important and came in to be a very helpful thing in the many years in Egypt. Secondly, basic management skill is communication. And early on in my career with the large integrated majors, you didn't necessarily hear the thoughts of the business objective from the decision makers. They're so far removed from you. But the beauty of an international independent oil and gas company is they typically lay the goals right out there and say, this is what we're going to do to get there, and here's your part. And so you see the goals and you communicate on a regular basis how those are going. And then down at a team level, it's important to say, well, senior management's looking at this, and so for us that means we're going to change our mapping focus or our drilling focus to be this to achieve the company goals. And then, finally, what I say when I talk about oil and gas, like I said early on, is to understand not only the below ground risk, which is the job of the geologists and reservoir engineers to depict what's down there and what's the risk of drilling for it and what's the success case economics look like, but the above ground risk as well. So being a heads up on, it could be the laws of development of Oklahoma, it could be the shared production goals, rules of Egypt. You just have to understand the playing field so you can be most beneficial for all involved.
That's really useful. So how did you motivate your teams? I mean, because I'm sure a lot of them are going through culture shock or having issues with communication.
That's right. As far as when you have a remote office, say in a third world country, Americans, we have the luxury of just a fantastic infrastructure and social setting, and you get to some of these countries and they may struggle for some of the basic content. So, understanding where you're going. But some people go to an international assignment and it just doesn't work out. You have to be not only motivated, but you have to be receptive to doing things a different way. Sometimes in a third world country remote office, you have to learn more about IT than you want to know, or, you know, how are we going to get the car repaired? I mean, just so many basic things that just overwhelm some people. So the communication is important, but you have to build a support system. So, you know, the man or woman that's working in the office for the company typically has a spouse in country. So it's very important that the entire family is comfortable, support for education and medicine, things like that. If the family is struggling on the outside, it usually impacts the worker in the office of the family partnership that's there on a foreign assignment. Or in many cases, people go as an individual and leave their family back in America, and that's very difficult too.
Yeah. So you've traveled to all these places. Is there some place that you haven't visited but you would like to in the future?
Oh, there's always a few new places I'd like to explore more of South America. I really enjoyed the Far East, working in China and Thailand, and just a fascinating culture. I would like to go back to Russia and see more of that. You know, the former Soviet Union covered 11 time zones, and it's just hard to get your head around that. I saw a few places when I worked there, but certainly much more to see.
That's great. Well, I hope you'll get the opportunity to see all that. Yeah, we have a special question that we always ask on Life Edge. Do you want to ask the question, Susan?
Okay. Okay, so in your life, what is it that has given you an edge?
My ability to juggle.
That's the first one. I like that.
Yeah, I mean, you know, life throws a variety of tasks at you at all times, and you have to be able to reprioritize all the time to keep what's most important on the front edge of what you're doing.
So speaking of juggling, do you have more than one book that you can juggle up in the air?
I was never very good at juggling.
Okay, well then let's show us one book. Hold it up your book if you have it with you.
All right, I certainly do.
Oh, awesome.
Excellent.
There we go.
Okay, world of culture, oil, and golf. We haven't talked about golf. We should at least ask one little question about golf. Where did you play the most golf overseas?
Scotland, milady.
Well, no, of course. Yes, that makes sense. Did you like it?
Yeah. You know, I learned to play golf as a youngster, and I'm a golf nut, admitted. And I'm never going to be a great golfer. I'm a good golfer, and I like to bet a few dollars, but it was just a lot of fun traveling around the world and getting to play different places. And on occasion, sometimes like in Central Africa, we had to build our own course, just a hole in the dirt with the one club we shared amongst each other.
Oh, that's really
That's
cool.
really great. Where can you find your book?
My book's available on Amazon. I'd urge you, if you're interested in what we've been talking about, to look at my website, of course, which is listed there. And that talks about, shows some pictures and has a couple interviews and that kind of thing. So Amazon, Barnes & Noble, all the Goodreads, all the digital outlets available. And of course, from my website, you can order directly an autographed copy if you're interested in that. And it's out on ebook as well.
Oh, amazing. And where's the best place for people to contact you if they're interested? Like, are you on social media or?
Absolutely. So, of course, my website has a contact page, but I'm active on Facebook, LinkedIn, and have an Amazon author page. But routinely look at Facebook and LinkedIn.
All right, great.
That's great.
Yeah, we'll add links to those in the video description.
And I'll have just for our viewers, we'll have a link to your written interview as well, where you go into a lot of cool detail about some of the places and insights. So that was a great interview. I want to thank you for that.
You're most welcome.
Yeah.
It was hard to stick to the question and not go on a long discussion, but I don't want to wear people out. Thanks so much.
All right, so we're just about the end of our time, so I'd just like to say thank you so much, David Allard, for coming on. It was really great time talking to you. We wish you the best for your book, and everybody go out and read his book now because
Absolutely.
you're going to have a lot of interesting things in there, I'm sure. So, yeah, thank you so much. Thank you, Susan, and yeah, we'll see you next time on Life Edge. Bye now.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Susan. It was a pleasure speaking with you ladies today.